Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Snap No Tap podcast. What is it today? It's the day before Labor Day here in America. I see that we have Brian Deneve joining us, and we may have Martin Witkowski, Poland's greatest export, showing up too. So Brian's short for time. I know that. So let's kick it. Let's get right into it. How you doing, Joe? And then how you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great, Tony. Looking forward to the 3-day weekend, trying to enjoy it. So how are you, Brian?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's I got 2 young kids. They just started school again, and yeah, we do have that 3-day weekend, which is a good time. Today, I don't know what it's like up down in Illinois, Wisconsin. It's got that crisp fall air feeling going on. I think it's about to rain, but yeah, just trying to enjoy last of things till things, speaking of kids, you may hear one screaming in the background every once in a while. Just have a heads up.
Yeah, it was nice and cool. Yeah, it's going to rain here too, but it was nice and cool. Matter of fact, it's saying it's 63 right now, which for me is great. I've not been feeling well for the last the last few months, really. And today I feel pretty good. Yeah, one of my problems was my hip again. And it was so bad for so long that I got kidnapped by my friend Scott, and he had set up, we had gone like maybe, what is it? Might have been 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, we went to what's called an immediate care center. They used to call them doctors on duty, or whatever. But out here, it's an immediate care. So they x-rayed my hip, and they said it wasn't broken. They didn't even see any arthritis, but I mean, I told them what I thought the problem was. And so they put me on this pack for 6 days of pills. Didn't work. Matter of fact, I think I had a bad allergic reaction to it. But my hip just kept feeling like, I don't know if you guys ever had this, but like if you pop it, like if you crack your knuckle and then it feels better. It kept feeling like that would have to happen, and it would pop a little bit. Like if I would put my hip up like this, it would pop a little. Like right now, there's pressure here. It's painful. But the other day I was getting out of my bed and it popped loud. I mean, loud. It sounded like a branch was snapping, and then I got an immediate shooting pain all the way down my leg. Lasted for less than a second, like a half a second. And I instantly thought in the back of my mind, this is a good thing. This is what I needed. And yeah, the hip feels much better now since that happened. My legs are sore, just muscular wise, because it's, I haven't been able to actually walk or anything. It was that bad, that hip. So now it feels much better. Hello, Martin.
Hey, how are you?
Okay, thanks for being so happy, and okay, take care. Anyway, no, so my hip feels much better. But sleeping in this cold weather, cool weather, I like it.
So, sorry, what happened to your hip? Did it get loosened up?
Yeah, oh yeah, since the last time I trained you on Zoom. Yeah, the other day, 3 days ago, whatever it was, I got out of bed, Martin, and it snapped. It popped. I mean, loud, like a branch snapping in half. I lost my balance, shooting pain, like electric going down this leg for less than a second, half a second. And then I'm like, I knew in my mind, I said, yep, this is what I needed. And it feels like 85% better, man, 90% better. So, you know, when I cross my legs, it'll pop, but now and then, but you know, I got to do this to keep my flexibility, which has been affected on this side. But yeah, it feels much better. Don't forget,
kind of
we're on for a
interesting.
Zoom meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah, of course. I've heard of the same thing for my friend that I was talking about that has the frozen shoulder. Like his doctor actually told him that a blow to the shoulder might loosen it up because it of itself getting better might be a time consuming thing, like take up to a year. But if it got hit, it might realign itself, which is kind of weird because he's not gonna go look for somebody to punch him in the shoulder, but it could help.
Yeah,
I know a
don't
couple
you hit him,
guys.
man. Martin hits hard now, so watch who you hit. But yeah, I just felt that because that's what happened when I first broke my hip. The very first time, I try to lift my leg sideways like this, you know, to make it pop. I would always do that, and because my hip would get tight, then it would pop, and fine. That time it just wasn't popping, you know. And I had Uncle Vinny when he was still alive, pulling on it and everything. I'm holding onto a pipe, you know, a vertical support beam while he's trying to pull on it. It didn't help. And then the next day I had to go to the ER and they found out it was broken. Well, at least this time it isn't broken, but I'm a little disappointed because they didn't find out anything. Just that I was inflammation, and the pills they put me on was supposed to help that, it didn't. But anyway, yeah, so this has been an interesting week. I know a lot of you guys know that I was a jazz musician, and about a week ago now, the greatest jazz organist that ever lived, man, Hammond B3, Joey DeFrancesco, died at the age of 51, I believe. And it shocked me, but it didn't, because he was very overweight, probably 400-pounder. And I met Joey, and I had dinner with Joey, as a matter of fact, on a couple of occasions here in Chicago. At the time, he was dating a local singer. And one of the guys at the dinner with us, a sensational jazz pianist locally, Tommy Molnar, he was at the dinner, the first dinner, and Tommy was playing later that night at the Drake Hotel. And so we all had dinner at the time at my fiance's restaurant that she worked at. And then we all went down to the Drake, and Joey sat in on the piano for a few tunes. Phenomenal, wonderful guy. Just, I can't say enough good things about the guy. He was shocked that I had pretty much every one of his recordings. While I wanted to pick his brain about music, he was just blown away because I could bench big. Back then I was benching, you know, that's when I was benching 480. He's like, you can bench more than me. So all he wanted to talk about was me, about lifting, about weights. And all I wanted to talk about was music. You know, I wanted to, you know, ask him technical things, you know, so I could learn which I did ask him some stuff. One of the things, being Italian from Philly, even though he was living, I think, in Arizona at the time, I asked him if he ever played the accordion, and he said no. But he had heard some guy, he didn't know his name, at the NAMM show that was like phenomenal on the accordion. I never knew who that, since he didn't know his name, I didn't know who it was. But one thing about Joey DeFrancesco was, so if anybody knows anything about Hammond B3 organs, they have drawbars on them, okay? Long levers, a series of them. And you move the drawbars in or out to get your sounds. So back in the heyday, in the 60s and 70s, you know, guys like Jimmy McGriff and, of course, Jimmy Smith, some B3 organists, when they would get up after, like during break, they'd push all the slide bars in, so other organists wouldn't come up and see exactly what their settings were. They tried to be secretive about it. Joey DeFrancesco was not like that. He would just share all of his knowledge. Matter of fact, he wanted to play with me, you know, and I'm like, well, I'll play the drums with you. I said, but I'm not playing the accordion with you, because I was out of shape with the accordion. That's just the kind of guy he was. He shared his knowledge, and he's writing out all the B3, his settings for the other guy at the table. He asked me if I wanted it. I should have said yes, but I said no. I don't play the B3. I'll never have a Hammond B3. But this is how nice of this guy, how open with his knowledge, and how he didn't hide back anything, right? He would just share. And it bothers me that he passed away. And it also bothers me that I didn't keep in touch with the guy. Through the years, I walked away from the music world, because my issues, my playing wasn't up to where I wanted it to be. I just got frustrated. I walked away from it. So it bothered me to find out that he passed away. It really did. He was a great guy, and he went to Lowry over here. I think it was Lowry, and he was supposed to try to get me a module for my MIDI accordion. Okay, to a B3 module, but it fell through. I was, it didn't happen. But so that prompted me to get introspective, and I did an internet thing, and it took me a while because I used to play my first professional band that I was in, a pro band where we get paid and everything all the time playing, was a small little, it was actually a duet. And then they heard me play. They said, "Oh, you're a good drummer. Would you like to join our group?" It was Jimmy B and Company. And Jimmy B, his last name is Brazilovics, and it was hard for me to spell it. So it took me a while on Google. And sadly, I found out he passed away in 2017 in Cleveland, suburb of Cleveland. And again, and he was 76 when he passed. I knew he was like my mom's age, right? So this was a bad week for me with music, finding out that he passed away, because he's not who I got my start with, but he was the first regular band that I joined. And it was him and a guy named Mike Austin, awesome Mike Austin, on upright bass. Jimmy played accordion, and we played for 2-3 years until I left Cleveland. You just lose touch through the years. So both of these guys were older than me. I was a youngster, but I might have been I started at 18, 19 something with him. I don't remember how old I was when I joined the group, 19 or 20, something like that. So yeah, that's been my week pretty much. But a shout out to all the other jazz fans that may be listening here on this podcast, man. We lost a giant in Joey DeFrancesco, man. Wonderful guy.
Being a jazz fan, I imagine most of the people you follow are going to be kind of of the older generation. So,
Joey was younger than me.
He was probably the exception, and I guess that kind of leads to my question: are there younger guys that you follow or are interested in?
Well, okay, so in the accordion. Well, all right, there's a fellow, and I don't know him, but I think we should get him on the show too. He's out of, I believe, Columbus, Ohio, somewhere central Ohio. He actually recorded a duet. He recorded with Joey DeFrancesco. He's also a monster Hammond B3 player, and he plays accordion. But his name is Tony Monaco. Okay, we need to get in touch with him. I don't know how old he is. I would assume he's around my age, right? Maybe either way, a little older, a little younger. But he's a phenomenal player and an educator. But yeah, there are some, Joe, that I listen to. But I don't listen to a lot of the newer stuff, because this may rub people the wrong way, but I like the older style of jazz where they, like, when we had great songwriters, okay, and they would, like, standards, they call it, and they would do a lot of that kind of material. That's what I like. Bebop, don't get me wrong, but some of the newer jazz guys that try to do their own songs, I'm not into that, okay? A lot of them they're just not composers. For me, for my taste. Everybody's got different tastes. but there are some up and coming, or some not up and coming, but some great accordionists that play jazz coming out of Europe, mainly Italy, and even Eastern Europe, that are hot to trot, man. These guys play well, very well. And they're all younger than me. So at least I know that the accordion's going to live on, man. That's good.
Tony, do you
Going
see
back to Joe.
any? Sorry, just one more question about that. So, Tony, do you ever see guys on YouTube that are like really young but virtuosos of the accordion? Like, just technically, because maybe they don't have the depth of the music and the experience of playing, but just technically being able to pull off things on the accordion that were technically difficult for you, and now having this YouTube ability to share and learn. There's like new things that are coming out in accordion.
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm glad you brought that up, because first of all, young, not real young, not single digits or 12-year-olds, but the accordion world for years, decades, they've had championships, national championships, world championships, Coupe Mondiale. And these players, generally they're classically trained, are monsters. They're every bit as good as any classical pianist. Now, Russians created a type of accordion called a bayan, spelled B-A-Y-A-N. And configured properly, the bayan actually has a greater range of notes than a classical piano, or than a piano. And there are guys and gals that are, it's unbelievable. And you study in Europe, you can go to conservatory and get your degree on an accordion, and be, lauded over there. Whereas over here in America, they don't necessarily have that. And the accordion's a brunt of jokes. Well, it's highly respected in Europe. The difference is many of those schools over there, you have to play either a button accordion, which is called like a chromatic accordion, or a bayan, which have buttons as opposed to keys, which alters everything. Okay. Again, I don't want to sound controversial, but it becomes easier to play those. So for example, anybody who's played keyboards here knows that your fingering, there's 12 keys. Your fingering is different in all 12 keys. Well, on a button accordion, a chromatic, your fingering is the same in all 12 keys. You just change your position. So imagine if you're a piano player and you're playing your scales down here, then just move it up, do the exact same scale, move it up again, do the same scale. I mean, think about it. It cuts your training time into 1/12 of the time. And because the buttons are grouped tighter, you get used to that, but you can hit notes that you can't do on a piano accordion, because, like a regular piano player or a keyboard player can hit notes two hands. You can use two hands. On the accordion, you got to do everything with one hand, on your right hand. So that's a big advantage. If I had to start all over again, I'd start off on a chromatic button accordion, and they have different styles of that as well. So yes, to answer your question, Martin, there are guys out there that are doing things on the accordion that I can't even, I mean, I understand what they're doing, but I sit back in astonishment at their level of musicianship. There's a guy that I highly recommend everybody listen to. His name is Richard Galliano. Now that's an Italian name, and his heritage is Italian, but he's from France. And Galliano is, I don't know how old he is, but he's older than me. He's got to be probably, I don't know, maybe 70 or something like that. And he plays a button accordion, so chromatic. So watch him. Just do a YouTube. He plays very modern French style jazz. He's, terrific. So there's guys out there, Martin, but in any instrument, especially like piano, there's children, single digits, 8, 9, 10 years old, that play ferociously. But it doesn't take 30 years to get this technique, especially when you're young. These are kids that don't mind going through the classical exercises, the lifting exercises, the finger independence exercises, which relates to what we do in martial arts or in fighting, the fundamentals. The greatest musicians that ever lived spent all their time doing fundamentals, either these independence or lifting exercises or strength developing exercises, or their scales and arpeggios, and they do them daily. And that's what I try to impart with fighters, that you've got to work on your basics and never stop. Forget about this fancy shit that you may or may not be able to pull off. Constantly work on your core fundamentals. When you get better at those fundamentals, everything else opens up to you, okay? Whereas when you don't master those fundamentals, you're going to struggle with anything. So that's something to be learned from the music world. There's these kids, and even up into their adult age, it just go through the monotony of doing these finger exercises over and over and over. And, you know, it's not musical, it's to develop the independence of your hands. So, or your fingers. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer, but it deserves some time. There's phenomenal people out there. And thanks to YouTube, you can catch wind of these guys.
Yeah, regarding age, Tony, that I did look up Joey DeFrancesco, and it says he began playing organ at the age of 4 and was playing songs by Jimmy Smith verbatim by the time he was 5, and at the age of 10 joined a band in Philly with Hank Mobley and Philly Joe Jones. So
Yeah, the drummer.
child prodigy, it sounded like. Yeah.
Well, he was with Miles Davis when he was a teenager, the Joey D. You know, he was friends, and I don't want to get into this subject of Joe Pesci, but that's a whole story for another day. But all I can tell you is Joey DeFrancesco was, to me, the greatest organist I've ever heard, and I'm not alone in that sentiment. And that's not degrading Jimmy Smith or any of the other greats. Joey became what he became because of those people. You know, Jimmy Smith and Jimmy McGriff and, you know, Jack McDuff and, you know, Milt Buckner, all these people. They laid the groundwork. And I think Joey's dad was an organist too, so that may have helped out in the beginning. But boy, I'll tell you, what a monster he was. Boy, just unbelievable. Did they list the cause of death? I'm assuming it was cardio, heart related or something.
Not on this wikipedia.org. They did show a picture of him from 2022, and it looked like he had at least lost a little weight compared to some of his earlier photos where he was definitely heavy.
Yeah, I would have to assume he was 400. But most of that was heart. His heart was 500 pounds. The guy was just a wonderful person who would always have the time for you, you know, and he would just, I mean, he loved music and he loved people, you know, and that's the biggest lesson I learned from him, is to take time for people and don't brush them off, because I've been blessed in the music world to have met legends. I mean, the greatest, the best of the best. And the ones that I got to meet personally, they were always very nice. I can't think of Jagoffs. The Jagoffs that I met in the music world were really not that good musicians. The best musicians were always there, willing to lend you a hand. And I've met Louis Bellson, the drummer, the famous drummer, you know, and I'm a Buddy Rich guy. Now, I've seen Buddy Rich 5, I think, times or 6 times, but I never spoke to him. I was intimidated. But Louis, he sat at my table on break. I mean, Louis was just, I don't think there was ever anybody in the music world like Joey DeFrancesco and him were like so friendly. And then the great Angelo DiPippo, who appeared in The Godfather and did so many soundtracks and everything. He gave me like lessons when I had my aneurysm, you know, like over the phone. It just got, you know, he was in New York, I was out here. What a freaking guy. And just, you know, technique that, man, you can't believe the technique this guy has. all willing to help, just Jerry Sigler here in Chicago that does our intro music. I studied with him for years and years and years. Just always willing to lend a hand, always willing to help. And there's tons of musicians that, I can't remember all of them right now, but they all. Oh, Frank Darone is another one, great. He passed away too, jazz singer and guitarist. And he used to call me up at the house. And even though he was a guitar player, theory is theory, music theory is theory. And I wanted to learn about his substitute chords and everything, that he would do on a guitar. Okay, let's sit down, let's talk, got a piece of paper. I'd go see him when he's playing, and he'd call the waitress over, give us a piece of paper and an ink pen. And I started writing down what he was telling me. On his break, when he could be relaxing and shit or socializing, he's spending time giving me tips. How can you beat people like this? You can't.
You think like when certain people reach a certain level, they're not afraid to share, they're comfortable letting other people know what they know. They don't have to hold their secrets per se. You think that's part of it?
Yeah, because that's totally different than the pool world, the world of shooting pool, where people were like secretive, you learn by losing money to these guys. The musicians, they've been around, these top shelf guys have seen other players that they admire. Okay, or that they can do things, the other players could do things that they can't do. So it becomes a mutual admiration society, really. And yes, they have what they call cutting contests, where you'd all jam together and try to cut each other. But the difference is, in the music world, there may be another cat in the group that has more technique than you, plays faster. You can't compete with that. But what you might have is the creativity. Okay. You may be able to make sounds happen that they can't do. Like you take your traditional, I'm going to stereotype here, but you take your traditional classical musician, has terrific technique out the ass, but they're not jazz guys. Okay. You put them in a jazz element, unless they've practiced jazz, they're not going to do so well. So the technique isn't everything. And that again relates to fighting. You can be a technical guy, you could be a sportsman, right? But that's not all there is to it. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to have a strategy, and you have to be able to improvise on the spot. And so you just don't want to become a machine necessarily. You do all the exercises that will allow you to become a machine, either in music or fighting, but then you got to tap into your mental abilities and be creative and, in essence, compose on the spot, be it musical or be it in a fighting situation. You've got to instantly recognize, in a fighting situation, for example, the scenario where you're at, and use all the tools that got you to where you are technically, and start working on developing strategies that you can employ your techniques spontaneously and creatively. So that's where you got to get, both musically and in fighting. You've got to have that creative spontaneity.
I had to look up what a cutting contest was. It's actually kind of interesting. It's like a predefined arrangement where musicians would try to outperform each other on it. Like they would actually go into it as it played and try to make the other guy look less talented by increasing the complexity of it. I'm gonna have to look that up to see how it works out in practice. It sounds chaotic.
Yeah, it was. Now I've been in cutting contests on the drums, but not necessarily head to head, because most places, you can't set up a couple sets of drums. So you have a drummer doing his thing or taking a solo on a tune, and then you get up there. But yeah, it's very interesting. But I've played the drums at jam sessions where they've had cutting contests with the other instrumentalists, which was really like awesome for me, because I'm getting into all of it, especially because they're doing battle. It could be two piano players or keyboardists or guitarists or horn players. And it's really awesome to be a part of that. And you as a bandmate, the drummer generally works with the bass player. Okay. The drummer and the bassist are, you're simpatico with each other. All right. You let the piano player or the other, guitarist, the rhythm guys, other rhythm section, you let them or soloists do their thing, but you and the bass player got to get that groove together. So we would sit back, the different bass players that I played with through the years, and just marvel at some of the guys we played, that would in these cutting contests, the shit they'd come up with, man, was pretty good stuff.
Does that ever occur spontaneously, or does it definitely like prearranged, like we're going to have a cutting contest, or just in the midst of a song, do musicians, you get a vibe that these two guys are starting to compete?
Both. Like if you have like say, I got my musical career started playing in a jam session with another Grammy winner, Joey Misculin, who's an accordionist in Cleveland. He had a bar on East 200th Street. And you just have musicians sit in. Okay, now, there wasn't necessarily cutting contests there, but that's one way of where it develops. Like, all right, there's going to be an advertised jam session, open mic, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to bring my gear. If you're a guitarist, you'll bring your guitar, probably your amp. Sometimes you don't need an amp, depending on if this is a venue where they actually have a bandstand and have equipment. So sometimes you're just going to sit in, but then other times you're gunning for the guy. All right, in a serious but not like physically threatening way. You're going to sit in and you're there to cut. And I've been involved in both scenarios where, and sometimes you're just trading fours, right? And it heats up from there, which meaning to those who aren't musical, you're just playing a song. Let's just say blues in C or blues in F, whatever the key is, it doesn't matter. And, and then everybody's taking their solos, and then soloist number one does something pretty neat. So soloist number two is like, well, I'm going to build off of that and then add a little bit more. And then when it's back to solo number one again, then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to work off of what he just did and I'm going to top that. And then it's like a crescendo, and it becomes, you get goosebumps when it's at that level of playing. It's just fantastic.
I know in the rock world, there's a very famous story of when Hendrix sat in on Cream, where Eric Clapton played. And I think it kind of became a spontaneous cutting contest between the two of them, which would have been very cool. I don't think it ever got captured or whatever, but that would have been something to hear.
Well, I can tell you a cutting. Well, it wasn't okay. So I had a friend in high school who took drum lessons. And his drum teacher was at some music store, excuse me, that used to exist in Cleveland. I don't remember the name of it now, but it was a big place. So his name was Dale or Gary, because there was two brothers, Dale and Gary. So I think he was Dale. So he's playing the drums. He's just testing out a set of drums. So he's just doing his thing. Boom, 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 boom. And he stops, and all of a sudden, he hears this other drummer go off and do some crazy shit. Doesn't know who it is because it's a big store. So Dale's doing something to answer the drummer. And then the drummer comes back with something that's just like beyond belief. I mean, he's like, the hell with this. He puts it down. He gets up. He walks over. It's Buddy Rich. Can you imagine that? I mean, can you imagine being in a music store with Buddy Rich and not knowing it? And Buddy Rich just blows you off makes you want to jump off to the high level bridge. What I would have paid money to be there. Now, I was just a kid. I was like 13, 14 at the time of this story. And I don't know when that happened. That may have happened in the 60s or something. Who knows? But wow, I can't even fathom getting on the stage with Buddy Rich, and having a drum battle with Buddy Rich. Oh, that's what they call those, by the way, Martin. When it's drummers, they're called battles, drum battles. Okay. They're not cutting contests with drummers. They're battles. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it's always been, drum battles.
Well, right, like the Wikipedia page even mentions that like a modern equivalent is like a rap battle. You know, they also
Oh
try to
yeah.
one up each other. So it's kind of like an extension of this.
Yeah,
Another
no, that's
one I was going to say is when Buddy Rich went up against Animal of the Muppets. I saw that.
yeah, well, that Animal guy, I think he was a British drummer. I forgot his name. I used to know his name, very good drummer. Of course, not in the class of Buddy Rich, but who is, or who was. But yeah, I've done my share of drumming in music stores that, that had gotten some attention. But never I never ran into Buddy Rich.
Tony, what do you think of, because this is really your era, growing up, kind of that neo jazz or a lot of those rock bands that infuse jazz, like Hall and Oates and Steely Dan. I guess maybe from a technical standpoint and whether or not you were fans.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know about Hall and Oates. Well, I mean, I'm a fan of theirs, but never looked at it as a jazz thing. But Steely Dan and another group, Toto, they were cutting edge with that jazz. Oh, Chicago is another group, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I'm going to get to that in a second. I loved it. Okay. I still get goosebumps. Some of the Bodhisattva was one of my favorite tunes by Steely Dan. I love them. But Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and then they had a drummer named Bobby Colomby. Now, Bobby Colomby did a drum fill on Spinning Wheel. That's the name of the song. Look it up. And that drum fill was very short, but it was so impressive. It was so wonderful that Buddy Rich commented on it. The greatest drummer that ever lived. He's like, Bobby Colomby, that drum fill on Spinning Wheels, perfect. He said, that's the perfect drum fill. Well, Bobby Colomby doesn't play the drums any longer, I don't believe. He's still alive, but he was a bitch. That guy was so good. He's an underrated drummer, right? Nobody talks about Bobby Colomby. They all talk about this guy, Neil Peart, this and that, whatever. Bobby Colomby, man, was as good as they come. Just a fantastic drummer. Danny Serafini was a great drummer. Oh, so Brian, you got me going with these groups. Yes. I love them. Now, I kind of got a little bit, I'm not so much into, well, I liked Weather Report, but some of the stuff got to be, like this free jazz. I wasn't into that free jazz. Okay. But guys like John McLaughlin, the great guitarist, he had technique and could play, but some of his style of music or the song choices wasn't for me. But he's still one of my favorite guitarists of all time. But give me George Benson, give me straight ahead jazz, bebop. I played with Joe Pass, who's a Grammy winner and just considered one of the greatest guitarists of all time. A big honor. That's the kind of jazz that I love more than anything. But this Bobby Colomby, and there's other drummers too, don't get me wrong. Shit, Ronnie Tutt, who just recently passed away, he was a drummer for Elvis Presley. Ronnie Tutt was a phenomenal drummer. I mean, shit, I thought he was great. Of course, then you got your studio guys, Steve Gadd, who played with everybody. He's still around. He wasn't so much a soloist, but he could lay the fills, the grooves and shit. He played a lot with Paul Simon and, oh God, who knows, pretty much everybody. But yeah, great players. I mean, monster players.
I was going to circle back to something you said, kind of talking about musicians, because I was thinking about Cream and Ginger Baker, and there was an observation
good too.
I heard. Well, that's cool that you like him. But he was kind of notorious as far as his personality, like, just kind of, there was a documentary on him, like Beware Mr. Baker, and they kind of go through his life. And it's weird because they show his personal life as being kind of a mess and the people he kind of hurt, but it also showed how singular his focus was on drumming. Like, it didn't matter who or what, and I think he even spent part of his career in Africa. Like, he went and just toured Africa and, trying to learn, their folk styles of drumming and things like that. but his singular focus his whole life, once he discovered jazz and drumming and things like that, that became his life until the day he died. And there was a statement, and it's kind of interesting because you give a good counterpoint, early on in the podcast to the statement that I heard that I thought applied to him, is that quite often, like, great men or men who achieve greatness are not necessarily good men. And I always took that to mean that to achieve greatness, sometimes you have to just focus on that one thing. And literally, like in his case, he shirked other responsibilities in his life. He was just totally all about that, regardless of what it cost him in other areas of his life. But you're giving counterexamples where that is absolutely not the case, which is kind of reassuring to hear, I guess, that you can be the world's greatest at, let's say, the organ and still be a good guy to sit down with and, interact with. So anyways,
Well, let me just throw out another name first, and then I'll answer this. Carl Palmer, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, another monster drummer. Okay, so what happens is, first of all, something just happened here with my computer. Hang on. Okay, we're all flawed people. Everybody is a flawed individual. When you achieve greatness or beauty, let's say physical beauty, like, oh, she's pretty, but she's a bitch, but she's pretty. You kind of overlook things, right? But there's no excuse for not being a good person. If you're not a good person, you choose not to be a good person. That's just your lot in life. Okay. But you're not a bad person because you're a great guitarist. Okay. You're a bad person because you're just a bad person. So I think people try to make excuses for others. Like Buddy Rich has a terrible reputation, right? They have these underground audio tapes of him going off on his band members. Well, I understand why he's doing that, because it was the Buddy Rich Orchestra. It's his name on the thing. And he wanted these players to play at a high level. You're professional, you're getting paid. Do your job, right? But you become flawed for a variety of reasons. And you can choose to overcome that and work on it, or you choose not to. That's totally your choice. And it's our choice whether we accept it or not. But if you're an asshole, you're not an asshole because you're great at something else. You're an asshole because you chose not be an asshole. Okay. And that goes for all of us. We all have our moments of being an asshole, but there's a lot of people that I've met in my life that take that as a badge of honor, and they revel in being an asshole. And those are just people I just don't like. I don't care how talented you are at other avenues. I know enough to know that there's other people that are going to be as equally talented or even better. There's rare circumstances where you can't be topped by someone. Okay. So yeah, I don't buy into that. I don't cut anybody slack for that. If you're a jerk, you're a jerk because of whatever made you the jerk. And then that's the reason you're the jerk. But you continue to be a jerk because you choose not to work on not being a jerk, if you get my point. So, yeah, no excuses for that.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of stories about sports people being jerks, but this is like kind of irrelevant in a sense that when they're performing, right, they just don't have time to be nice. So it's really, you have to look at the personality outside of like the arena where they're being on and they're being evaluated on the performance, right? It's just like impossible for people to be able to sign autographs when they're rushing into a tournament or something like that. So, these like assessments, whether somebody's an asshole or not an asshole, can't be really made on like a very narrow range of time. Some of these sports guys turn out to be like super nice over time because they've given up on competing and they don't have that drive anymore. So maybe that's really more of their true personality.
Perhaps. And another take on it is we all have bad days, but imagine being such a celebrity that you can't go to the bathroom. All right, because people are hitting you up for autographs or this or that, and da 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 da. You just tend to shut those people down. I don't judge, and I've met a lot of celebrities. What I did, when I bodyguard or whatever. But I'm talking about when you're an asshole in a social setting, when you're amongst quote unquote peers, okay, where nobody's here to ask for your autograph or hound you. There's no excuse for that. But yeah, I can imagine, well, no, I cannot imagine being so famous that, you know, you don't have a moment's peace, no matter where you go. Somebody's, hey, there's Joe Cardinal. Look, you know, yeah, I can't get, I can see how people would end up being like standoffish and shit. And that's why a lot of celebrities hire bodyguards, not to protect them from imminent threats, but just crowd control, just to keep people away. Don't let these people get to me. I want to go out and have a dinner by myself. You know, Elvis Presley used to go to the movie theater at night when it was closed. He'd pay the movie, you know, whoever owned the movie theater in not Tupelo, Mississippi, where was he at? Memphis. So he could watch the movies in peace, and he'd bring his entourage and shit. So I don't know what he paid him, but he gave him money just so he could be in peace. So I'm talking about just artists or celebrities or just special people, scientists, whatever, or just jerks. When they, you know, in the privacy of their own home, that kind of jazz. There's just no, I don't think there's a reason for that, man. I don't know. That's just, but again, who am I? You know what? I'm not, you know, I'm sure there's people out there who think I'm, you know, a jerk off too, because I have my moods. You guys know me, you know, I get.
Well, there's a lot of people out there that think that for sure.
What's that?
I said there's a lot of people out there that think that.
Yeah, right. Well, let them get, you know, stand in line. But yeah, you know, you have those days, but overall, are you there for somebody? Are you willing to help? Do you apologize? Some of these guys, now I don't know the story that you're talking about Ginger Baker. I don't know anything about the guy other than I listened to him play. I don't know. I didn't get into him, right? I mean, I don't mean that negatively. I just, you know, I never read up about the guy. But Louis Bellson, he's from downstate Illinois, Italian guy, Belsanini, I think his real name was, married to Pearl Bailey. He had a daughter, Dee Dee Belson, beautiful girl. She died young. When I was a young kid, I think I was 14 or something. They hit Slingerland. He played slings. Slingerland had a national drum contest. Now I wasn't good enough to, I mean, first of all, you had to read, which I never read drum charts, but I wasn't good enough. But anyway, it was Slingerland Louis Bellson National Drum Contest. And it was won by a guy named Hank Guaglianone, okay, who was, I believe, also from downstate Illinois. I was in Cleveland, so I you know, didn't matter to me. But I don't know whatever happened to this Hank Guaglianone. Apparently he never hit it big. I mean, you know, I don't know. I don't mean to besmirch the guy. Maybe he's successful and happy and content, but I don't know whatever happened to him. But I can tell you this, Louis Bellson was so kind and took time out and to sit at that table, little table. It was just me and my girlfriend at the time. It was like just 4 seats, you know, and he sat down. I mean, and he spent like 10 minutes and we're just talk. You know, I mean, it was unbelievable. Same with Frank Derone. You know, just, you know, a lot of great guys that, you know, had no reason to spend any time with me, chose to, and I'll never forget it.
I think I would imagine they enjoy someone they can at least converse music with, who's knowledgeable enough and has a passion, even if you're, you know, not a national level guy or a known guy, but someone who can truly appreciate, you know, at a technical level what they're at. They've got to enjoy that kind of company. I think they would, you know, that's just my thing.
Well, I think part of it was, all right, so most of the, well, they all knew I was a drummer, but being an accordionist, a jazz accordionist of all things, which is rare, especially back then. Like I told you, now there's a bunch coming from Europe, but I was about as rare as a unicorn, right? One of the few that, so I could understand theory. So when now this didn't pertain to Louis Bellson, but like other, like Joey DeFrancesco and Frank Derone, for example, I could sit there and talk theory, chord structures and harmony and you know, blah, 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 which for one, being a drummer talking like that, and number two, being an accordion player. Well, Frank Derone was hip to that because he's like, I mentioned earlier in this podcast about Angelo DiPippo and how he's probably the greatest technician and all that, accordionist, and was in The Godfather. Well, guess what? Frank Derone went to high school with Angelo DiPippo, and as a matter of fact, they were in the senior talent show together. Frank Derone on guitar and DiPippo on accordion playing jazz. So that blew Frank Derone's mind, because he already knew about jazz accordion players. But to find one in Chicago and to find one that knew Angelo DiPippo, so I think that's probably what bonded Frank Derone and I. And then of course my dad was a guitarist. So even though I wasn't close with my dad, I would, I mentioned some shit about my dad to Frank Derone. So it was like it was just the right time for me to meet Frank Derone. It was just great. I miss him terribly. And what a singer, such a great singer, but I was more interested in listening and play. I wanted to hear him play.
Not to change topics, and I almost feel like we should save this for another episode, but we lost another giant this week, right? Ernie Schaefer.
Ernie Shavers, a great boxer, hardest hitter of them all. And I got to meet Ernie. Well, I saw him fight, which was an interesting thing. And he was at my gym, boxing thing. And we can get into that subject another time. But if I recall correctly, so I saw him fight at the Richfield Coliseum. I think it was 78 or 79, I think. And I believe the guy he fought was Eddie Parrott. I forgot the guy, Eddie Parrott, I think. But if I remember correctly, the guy that Shavers was supposed to fight backed out, and then Parrott was the, because I'm thinking of Benny Parrott. Parrott was the substitute. Well, it was a disgrace, because he took a dive, he fell down. He was afraid to fight. He was literally afraid of Ernie Shavers. And I think in the second round, it might even been the first round. I don't remember now. It was either the first or the second round. The referee just had to stop the fight. He'd get hit and then he'd fall because he didn't want to deal with Ernie Shavers. Well, you can't fault the guy. I mean, Shavers hit. I mean, it was unbelievable. So fast forward many years. I'm in Chicago and I'm friends with Johnny Lira, the former champion boxer. We're talking about Shavers now. Johnny had a way of telling stories. Let's put it that way. And Johnny was like working out of, you know me with names. I don't remember names anymore. Famous trainer, not Angelo Dundee, but it doesn't matter. I was out of Vegas. Johnny Taco. So I guess Ernie Shavers was in the gym. So Johnny's like, yeah, I was walking to the gym and I saw the building, it's a concrete building. And as I'm walking up to it, I saw the outside of the building. I saw the walls like shake. And the guy's with me. He's like, oh, we're having an earthquake. He's like, no, man, those walls are shaking. It's no earthquake. The guy's like, what is it? He's like, I bet you Ernie Shavers is in there working out on a heavy band. And sure as shit, it was Ernie Shavers. But the walls weren't shaking. That's just Johnny embellishing the story. But now Johnny was a welterweight. So Johnny wasn't going to shake anything except his booty, but that's the respect that Shavers had. And because he hit so doggone hard, it was punishing. And it's a shame. He was 78 or something like that. So he never won the title. At least I don't believe he did. But what a great fighter he was in that regard. And here's the thing, people out there, and we're going to segue into this too. Shavers was only about 210. Okay. He wasn't like some behemoth, right? Like 280. He was like 210, 220, something like that. And yet he just, it was all science. He just knew. He just had that natural ability and of course, training, proper mechanics. And he just hit so damn hard. He put everything behind his punches. So he had the conditioning to go along with that, because when you're throwing, 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, in essence, over every pitch, your arm will blow out, right? Well, that's how it is with boxing. You keep throwing power punches all the time, you're gonna blow out. So you have to have the conditioning. Ernie Shavers had that conditioning. Okay. So there's factors at play. I never got, I never got over how people were just in awe of him. Okay. To this day, he's still regarded as, and we didn't have the science probably available, or if we did, nobody utilized it to actually register the punching power. But that probably wouldn't work anyway, because it's one thing to just be in a gym setting and do something. It's another one when you're in the fight, okay, with the adrenaline and the audience, and all of that. But man, yeah.
Yeah, Tony, it sounds like he had a pretty strong Ohio connection, at least early in his career.
He's from Warren, Ohio, or something like that, out by Youngstown and shit. Which Youngstown brought out Ray Boom Boom Mancini, Harry Arroyo. These were champion fighters coming out of Youngstown, that area. Yeah, Shavers was the man. He was really something else. And that brings me to this thing about his size. He wasn't a giant. So let's get to catch wrestling here. So one of the things 25 years ago when I came out with the lost art of hooking, everybody's like, well, I mean, hey, he's big and strong. Look, Tony, you got to be big and strong to use this shit. No, you don't. Obviously, we proved this. We dispelled that myth. But I don't have a lot. I have basically no memorabilia from my childhood. As many people know, when I came here, I got robbed. I lost everything: my accordion, my drums, my photographs, cassette tapes and shit. There was just a couple things that my grandmother had, and ergo my mom ended up getting. Well, I'm still cleaning out stuff here about my mom, and I had to dispose of some clothes. Let me just step away for a moment and get this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Hang on.
One of the things as far as Ernie Shavers, there was a Letterman interview with George Foreman. It's still on YouTube. You can find it. But Letterman was asked, kind of rattling off names of like, who did Foreman fight? And Letterman erroneously asked him, hey, asked him if he fought Ernie Shavers, and George Foreman was like, thank God, no, I'm so glad I didn't fight him. So that's something if George Foreman's like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to fight that guy.
Okay, two things I found.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
go ahead.
Tony.
Well,
I was going to say that.
Go ahead, Martin. Go ahead.
I was going to say that to your point, the interesting thing about Shavers is like, if you look through a Wikipedia page, there's nothing that they can really attribute his power to, right? Like he started boxing late. He wasn't a giant. He was only 6 feet tall. He didn't have like some athletic background in a sport that you could pinpoint saying, he was an amazing or Olympic discus thrower, and therefore he had amazing power. It's just everybody that he fought was always in awe of how much he was able to dig into his punches. And it's just like you said, it's got to be science. There wasn't a singular source of that power.
Right. And that's the thing that lacks in a lot of people nowadays, the science. A lot of people want techniques. Show me something new. Show me something new, something fancy, something flashy. Well, you're not even mastering the shit you're doing now. Okay. And so that's the thing with Ernie Shavers. Now, granted, Shavers developed that punching power at the cost of other avenues of his boxing repertoire that may have lacked a little bit, right? But when you have that kind of punch power, you can get away with it. It's like a get out of jail free card sometimes. Like Roy Jones had that creative or the crazy reflexes and all of that shit that he could get away with not boxing scientifically because he had such great physical gifts. And then when those gifts slowed down, then he started to get tagged. But Shavers just had it all in a lot, okay, just boom, boom, boom. He had the power coming from his feet, hips, all the way, he just, everything clicked with him. And, another guy that was like that was Max Baer. He had good punching power. He had a great right hand and he worked on it, but Max Baer never took boxing seriously. So, he never became one of the world's greats, but he probably could have. But anyway, this is what I found. Two things. First of all, I mailed ordered when I was a kid for the Charles Atlas. I thought I was getting the whole Atlas course. All I got was this booklet. about making you a champion and all of this. But anyway, I found this, but this is what I wanted to find or talk about. This little book by Joe Bonamo, Vibro Power. Okay. So what this was is just exercises, pretty much just you go through it and it's all like isometric exercise. You can't really see this, but there's just a bunch of exercises and blah, blah, blah. So it takes you through it for 3 weeks. But here's what I wanted to get at, and this is really important. In the center is what this is I don't think the camera can pick it up, but it's a chart. It's got, let's see here, Frank Late, Burt Goodrich, who was the first Mr. America, Sigmund Klein, Sig Klein's legendary, Barton Horvath, Dan Lurie, Terry Robinson, and Abe Goldberg, bodybuilders. It's got their size, weight, all the dimensions of their body and shit. So this is for the people out there. This is very important. Women, children, whatever. Tony's a big, strong guy. Bullshit on that, because I have the charts right here. This was about 9 months after I was training with Stanley Rodman. This is important. This was May of 1978. So I started with him in the summer of 77. So I was 5'6", and I weighed 117 pounds. And my upper arm was 10.5 inches. My chest was 33.5, and so on. That's what I was when I was working out with him until I grew up, So I wasn't this behemoth, this big kid. I was a little runt. And imagine, I was lighter and smaller than that when I started with him. I was probably 110, 112. I was skinny. And so for anybody out there, now remind you, Rodman was the greatest of them all that ever lived with this fighting shit. And he had the strength of 10 men, in essence. And I was putting up with this. I don't say this as a build up to me. This is for you people out there that think you don't have the physical gifts, okay, that you're too small or you're this or that. You're not, okay? I doubt anybody is this, like I told a woman last week or whenever I did the last seminar, Leslie, she's small, she's petite, but I said, I was about your size. You might even be bigger than me when I did this stuff, when I started off on this stuff. So obviously I grew up, but when I graduated high school, I was 178. That's when I ended my 5 years of training with him. I was 178 pounds. So that's not big, okay? And I went through all of this training gradually, escalating in size as I got strong and as I matured. So let that be a lesson to people. You don't have to be a Hercules. Matter of fact, the only reason you hear of famous, if you want to call them that, catch wrestlers, but really just professional wrestlers, they're heavyweights. But that's because size mattered back then. But generally speaking, man, some of the finest wrestlers or even boxers were not heavyweights. They were smaller weight guys, period. So use this as an inspiration. So I was probably about 112 pounds or so. I would think 110, 112 when I started. Not very big.
Do you think the difference between your size and he's not only is he a full-grown man, but he's one of the strongest men that ever lived. So you having to train, basically he's your full-time training partner for 4 years. That acted like, I don't know, it was like a catalyst or like, that, how did that affect? Because at that point you're used to, when you actually become full size yourself, there's probably no physical difference weight wise, that you'd come up against that would be as extreme as that difference training under. So how much do you think that helped your game going up against someone who just was so physically dominant over you, not only technically, but like physically, like you could never physically best him with your attributes?
It showed my stupidity. It just was, I didn't see, you're asking a very analytical question. I was 13 when I started with them and 18 when I quit. Okay. At 13 years of age, I didn't think all this stuff. I mean, it's like, okay, I got to deal with this. This is what it is. So 5 years of, I was like probably 2 or 3 weeks shy of 5 years with the guy. So call it 5 years, of knowing that, okay, what are my other options here? It was tough. I think it made me fearless. I mean, I never had to worry about fighting anybody else. I mean, ever. Why? I just dealt with this guy over and over and over. Everybody else, it's a walk in the park. So I guess it gave me that, but it also held me back a lot, emotionally, right? Because I could never like puff my chest out, so to speak, because how could you with him? He was just too always, I had different skill sets than him. I mean, I understood all of that. Okay. I realized that I could box. He wasn't much of a boxer and I was faster than him. I got all of that, but it didn't matter to me, right? What mattered to me was his incredible power. The knowledge I felt I could acquire that. Okay. It's just a matter of time. I'll acquire his knowledge. I'll get that. But it was his physicality, that super strength, and his pain tolerance. He didn't feel pain. He was impervious. And it got to be the point of frightening. I was always scared when I went in there. Always afraid that you're playing with, I guess it would be like a bomb disposal unit. One mistake and that bomb goes off and you're dead. That's how I always felt. Like I'm working with live explosives here. Okay. If he decides to snap, somebody's dying here. It's going to be a death thing. Okay. That's the mentality that I had. And I think that paid dividends because he always used to say, I want your training here to be, it's going to be worse than anything you'll ever encounter on the streets. And I knew exactly what he meant by that. Okay. He didn't mean like 20 guys with pipes and machetes and sabers and guns. I mean, he's talking, realistically, you're never going to have anything like this. And he was right. 40 years later, 45 years later, it's been proven. I've never been I've never been anybody that's even remotely like him. So I think it probably fractured my development in other areas of my life. This is probably something that a psychologist would have to, dig out. But I could never bask. The one time I tried to bask, he snuffed me. Okay. So I never had a chance to really relish anything. And there, like I said, there was no tournaments. There was no way to, go out there and just whoop everybody. And but it wouldn't have mattered because he was just like in a way like my grandfather. Like my grandfather boxed, so when I would box or do something, I'd win or something, I'd say, I won. Yeah, but you're just fighting kids. I fought grown men the best. So, I never would have, that was a different era, man, where like today, you got to almost coddle everybody, kiss everybody's ass and, you did great, son. Here, you came in 10th place. Let me go take and buy you an ice cream cone. That shit never happened. Okay. In my growing up days, you lost, you went home. You won. Yeah. You'd go out and get your ice cream cone. You lost. Goodbye. Go home, practice. So I don't think I would have ever, I never would have gotten the accolades. And that's why it made me a hard ass. You guys know because, even Martin, you guys were there when I used to be like rough on you guys, not just physically, but verbally, fuck you, you're not doing well, you suck. That's the environment I came from. I didn't come from, you're so wonderful. God, why are you here? I should be studying with you. That kind of shit. I've kind of turned into that now because the whole world's like that. They're like a giant marshmallow. All right. You got to be nice all the time. And, shit, why bother watching my videos? Let's just put on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, or sing Kumbaya. This pisses me off because this is what you've got to have a dose of reality. When you suck, somebody needs to point that out. Now, you don't have to go and brutalize the person, but you got to reach them and say, hey, man, look, you're just not doing well. Okay. You have it within you, do it. So yeah, I never got the mental support. All I kept getting was the physical punishment. Yeah, you just rise to it, man. Or you fail. I didn't fail on this point. I failed in other things in my life. Don't get me wrong. But not in the fighting, because what was the alternative? Joe, you've been to Cleveland with me. You know the situations that I was in. Do you think I want to be a statistic? Do you think I want to be dead at 15, 16 years old? No, I want to live. So that's the price I had to pay.
I got to get out of here. My takeaway is the world is a marshmallow nowadays, and I'm gonna use that term. I can attribute when I do, Tony.
All right. Well, thanks for leaving.
Great time, guys.
We appreciate
Take care.
it. All right. See ya.
See you, Brian.
Well, I don't, don't get me wrong. When I say the world's a marshmallow, there are hard asses out there that doing it, that are doing it the way I think, me personally thinks it should be done. But this, there's just, I don't know. You've got to be. The flamboyancy turns me off. I like a person who gets the job done. That's one of the things about Tyson. If you remember Mike Tyson, he wore the black shorts and he came in with that towel. None of this big fancy robes and all of this crap. He was so old school about it, right? And he could come up with the goods, So now forget about him outside of the ring. I don't care about that. I'm just talking about his in-ring performance was astonishing to me. And yeah, I look back at Jim Brown, the football player from Cleveland, the greatest running back of them all. Watch any of those guys back then. When they scored a touchdown, they dropped that football. That was it. There was none of this spiking and all these dancing things and shit. I mean, I don't like that.
There was some quote, right? Like it was either from Jim Brown or somebody else saying that he doesn't dance in the end zone because he wants to act like he's been there before and he's going to be there again.
There you go. Yeah, maybe, but I just don't, I don't play the game. Okay. Let's just play the game or do your job, this and that, whatever. That's just how I am. And then afterwards, there's all that time for those hijinks, right? But it irks me. I used to frigging hate Sammy Sosa with the hop when he hit that home run and hop. I'm like, come on, man, please don't do this, or others that, would, McGuire hit that home run and just hold the bat, watch the ball soar and shit like that. I mean, come on. I don't know. I wasn't around in Babe Ruth's time and all that, or even really Mickey Mantle, but I don't know, man. I just don't see, Hank Aaron doing that. I remember Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron never did that. Okay. I don't remember Willie Mays, but I do remember Hank Aaron, and I don't remember Hank Aaron doing that kind of stuff. Okay. Whatever. That's just me. I'm not saying my way's the right way. Maybe I'm antiquated. Maybe I am an old fart, but get the job done.
Yeah, I think like I give some of these guys a pass in the sense that they're trying to make money during a fairly brief career, and some of it is trying to like develop a personality as they do it. Like not everybody's going to be Mike Tyson and have a huge amount of wins and just be able to get by on their ethic alone and their results. And some of them just try to take a shortcut and get some more interest from the fans through antics. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's all entertainment in the end.
Right.
I do get that. But in my life, well, outside of music, in my life, this wasn't about entertainment. I wasn't going to become, like I said, there was no MMA shit back in my day. So being an entertainer never entered into it. It was all about surviving the streets. But even with music, I will say this. I used to do some fancy stuff on the drums, like show off kind of, like flashy a little bit. But never at the expense of my musicality. Okay. I wanted to be as good as Buddy Rich. Never happened, but that was my goal, to have that speed and that dexterity at the cost, though, of other things. So, for example, I mentioned Steve Gadd, and he could lay down these grooves and shit. Well, I wasn't really into that, okay? And I wasn't really strong on Latin music. I mean, I could play wedding music, like rumbas and cha-cha-chas and shit. But to just like play a whole job of salsa or whatever, that wasn't going to be me, okay? I did not have that in me, okay? So everything comes at a price. This is my point. Like Shavers could hit hard, but there was other things that lacked. We all have to make sacrifices. The key to success is knowing that whatever it is that you want to key up on, that you have the potential to be like extraordinarily good at it. Okay. And the stuff that you're going to lack behind is not going to be a disqualifier. It's not going to like wipe you out. Okay. So for example, in the key in the music, it's like, let's say you want to just play so really fancy, like one song or whatever. If you can just play in the key of C better than anybody in the world, but yet you can't play in the other 11 keys, you're done. Okay. You're never going to make it as a musician because your flaw is, you're done, you're dead. So that when it comes to fighting, yeah, it's great to have a point of excellence, but don't let it now, and knowing that it's going to take so much time to develop that, but don't let other avenues of your abilities fail so drastically that somebody can capitalize on it and snuff you. Okay, so it's a balance. And it's hard for people to even think about this. Most people don't even think about it. But then if you can think about it, then you have to analyze it. And if you can't analyze it, you got to find somebody else that can analyze it for you. And it becomes difficult. That's why with my Tri-C program, that's what I try to do with people. Look at you, get your videos, watch you as you develop. We may alter things because I got to get to know you. I got to get to see how you move, what your skill sets are, and so on. Ask Martin. With these Zoom things, I'm constantly changing his training because of watching his body and how it adapts. And now something else opens up. Okay, I don't want to get personal about Martin stuff, but the other day, like, we know where his weakness is now. Okay. There was a weakness in the beginning. That weakness is gone. Okay. Now, as we're getting more into it, now another weakness got exposed. He knows what it is. So now we're going to be focusing predominantly on that. Once that weakness gets eliminated, well, let's move on and see if there's another weakness that comes out. Maybe not. Maybe so. Then we work on
The
that.
good news is I'll never run out of weaknesses, Tony.
Well, we all have them, right? We all have those things. The key is so many people don't want to get those weaknesses exposed. Okay, like in the gym or the sanctity of your home. You need to expose those weaknesses. If you keep covering them up, you're never going to know they're there. That's the problem of like Rodvan with me with the top wrist lock. I got so good at that top wrist lock, I could probably top wrist lock anybody. And he's like, stop it. Don't use this anymore. Quit for a while. You're too good at it. Everything else is failed. You're not getting anywhere on anything else. So, he was astute with that. Enough with this top wrist lock, start doing something else because I was becoming unbalanced. Okay. So that's how you have to be in life. You got to just find your weaknesses and forget about them, or not forget about them, forget about the stuff you're good at for a while and work on your weaknesses. And it's the gym. Who cares if your training partner snuffs you? Who cares? Right? It's the gym. You're here to work eventually on your stuff that's your weakness. Now, Angelo DePippo, again, told me once, so I'm gonna give you a secret. You're gonna practice and you're gonna hit a plateau where you're not getting any better, or you might actually even start to go down a little bit. He says, that's what you want. That's what you're looking for. He says, don't quit, because that means you're right there. You're gonna go over the top. You're gonna make your next leap. You're gonna make your next gain. That's how the body works. That's how the body mind works. I never forgot that. So if you're in your training and you hit that wall, don't quit. Maybe just switch something a little bit around, but you're ready to make that mark. And that's what happens with Martin. I use those types of principles on Martin all the time. Martin gets up here, he's going, and then he's like this, stagnant, like for a while, and then boom, we switch one thing and everything gets excelled. So you've got to have a coach that can understand that and not just randomly throw a new technique or a new exercise at you. It all has to be synchronicity. It's all got to, tie in together. And, you really got to know the human body. You have to understand anatomy. You have to understand physiology and psychology. Okay. So like, you don't want to take somebody who's really good at a certain phase of training and then put them into something they're in the negative, that they're so bad that they suck, and then they lose their enthusiasm and shit. And they'll be like, fuck it, I'm not going to practice this. I'm going to go back to what I feel good about. So it's a balancing act. You got to watch. So there's a lot to it. It sounds simple, but it's really not simple.
So are you kind of referring to, let's take I don't know, I don't know an example, but like you said, you hit a plateau in your training. So it's not, this is over the course of a few sessions, you start to notice that you're not making progress. And that's when you have to mix things up a little bit. Is that kind of what you're paying attention to? Or is it like in the midst of, can you also do it in the midst of a single session as well?
Not okay. On paper, you would say yes, but no. The answer is no. Now, Martin and I are different. We've known each other 20 years. I've known you 20 years. When you get somebody new, okay, that you don't know, right? You've got to evaluate, are they putting the time in? Okay. They may not be getting any better because they may not train outside of the gym. All right. Your lesson may be the only practice they get. So you've got to have that rapport with the student to find out the truth. How much hours are you putting in when you're not here with me? Are you doing anything? Okay. That's the key of finding out. Now that takes truth. Okay. That your student has to be honest with you. Music teachers, good ones that care, they can pick up on that. They know because they've trained so many people. Music isn't like a big physical thing, right? When you train enough people, you know what the body should be able to do. So when you're beginning with me, I know what your body's capable of. You should be making some sort of progress. If you're not, then I know you're either two things. You're not putting in the time or effort, either physically or mentally, or you have a physical impediment, maybe an injury or something. So that's what I have to determine, Joe. Then once we get to that determination, then let's say all is well. Okay, yes, they're putting in 10 hours a week, no physical impediments. Okay, then that means to me they've hit the wall. Okay, so now we got to tweak it, change it up a little bit. So that's a twofold process.
I also noticed that there is an overall health benefit to switching things around. Like if you stick with the same routine, you figure out ways to cut corners in it, and you're not getting as much out of it, right? So like a predetermined set of exercises, you mentally end up doing things more efficiently, but therefore not taxing your body to the extent that it should be taxed. So having somebody look over it and alter the routine to make it more efficient overall is hugely important. You're not going to be able to do that by yourself unless you have the mental discipline to kind of record yourself and reevaluate where you're going. That's where a coach is so important.
You hit the nail on the head, and it is physically impossible to do it yourself. Okay, kind of like giving yourself a full body massage. You can't do it, right? Because you can't really relax. You can't relax your mind because you're concentrating. When you're doing the exercises like I have Martin go through, part of it is he doesn't know what's next. Okay, he can't. So I watch his body, and we talk during the meetings or during, with the Zoom thing. So I listen and I watch and I try to just jumble up stuff so he cannot adapt physically or mentally. That's the key. So when you're trying to do this yourself, it's already predetermined. You already know what you're going to do next. If you're doing, let's just say jumping jacks, and all of a sudden you're gonna, well, I think after I'm done with the 10th jumping jack, I'm going to run. That kind of like, no, that's not going to help. Okay. You don't know. You have to not know what's coming next, and you can't just have somebody that doesn't know physiology just randomly throw out exercise. It's not going to happen either, because I do exercises, I do intensity, everything's varied with Martin. So he's like on a wave, up and down, like the high seas. He never knows what's going to happen next. And it also helps to build a sense of what's the word, Joe, you'll know, I talk about that when you're training my mind's blank, like when you get nervous,
I don't know, your
sense of,
anxiety or your,
anxiety, yeah. So you get that anxiety build up. Adrenaline, that's the word. So the anxiety helps to build that adrenaline because you can't get comfortable. Because Martin doesn't know what the hell's next. Okay, or anybody, but I'm using him as an example. What's next? What's asshole Tony going to do to me next? Okay, that's so important. So then at the end of the workout, now I'll speak on Martin's behalf. He can clarify this, but one of the goals is for me is, well, I took what Tony had, I handled it, and that's a sense. There's your pat on the back. There's your friggin' ice cream cone, okay, for a job well done. You took what I threw at you, and you handled it. That's your achievement, okay. So then next week it's going to be something else, and let's see how you achieve next week. That kind of deal.
Right. So like getting through the workout is in itself an accomplishment, right? Like if the workout is hard enough and you can get a sense of satisfaction that way, versus going through like a checklist, which is like a canned workout, and then you end up cheating your way through it because you can anticipate all the exercises and it's far less fulfilling.
Yeah, and that happens when you fall into the numbers game. I want to do 20 reps, or I want to do this or that. And then you get people like we talked about before that are chinning up, doing chin-ups or pull-ups with all, kicking their legs and just cheating to get the numbers. It's not about that. It's about the totality of it all. And it's not even the totality for today. It's the totality for about 2 years from now. Okay. I look at where you're going to be 2 years from now, or whatever the number would be. So there's a lot to it that I think you've got to get rid of this instant gratification, because you will be gratified, and it's going to happen quicker than you think if you apply yourself properly and not look for it immediately, like right this minute. It'll happen quicker than you think, but it won't happen just this minute. I was mentioning to Joe, since I haven't been feeling good, I haven't been going out much or anything. So I'm doing finger exercises, just on my right hand for the key, for the accordion or whatever. And, I got to go sometimes super slow, like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But I'm making, progress. Good progress. Okay. And I put myself on a 4-month, starting September 1st, 4 months from September 1st to January 1st of these exercises, independence exercises and strength and whatever you want to call it, for my fingers. Fingers obviously are different than working out the whole body. You got to be very careful because you don't want to, these are small, you don't want to injure them, but you will make progress. Okay. You're not going to make progress in that session. For example, let's say you're doing your scales and you're doing at 60 beats per minute. Don't increase them that day. Stay at 60. Tomorrow, do 61. The next day, do 62. Okay. Don't be trying to increase them on the fly. Have patience. Okay. So imagine this. You start off at 60, and in 4 months, what's that, 120 days? If you increased one a day, if you're capable of it, you could potentially be at 180 from 60. That's quite an increase in only 4 months. Okay. There's people that want to do that kind of shit in 4 days. No, you've got to temper your expectations. But we were talking earlier about children, Martin, and virtuosity. It doesn't take 30 years to get technique. Okay. Now, according to Jerry Sigler, my teacher, he says, I could show you everything or teach you or show you everything you'll ever need to know about jazz in 3 days, but it'll take you 3 years to get the technique. Okay. So his take on it was like 3 years, and it may be. It may be shorter, but, I mean, 3 years is, you can't even, that's college shit's 3, 4 years. So, if you take that, like the Rod Von thing with me, probably was 3 years for me to get 3-ish, 3.5, let's call it maybe 4, whatever, to get, I think it was closer to 3 to get to be where I was, like so good that the rest was just my body growing into it and other things. Cause the first 6 months of the training roughly was just exercises. And then, so another 3 years. So like, let's call it 3.5 years, but it was like 6 months of preparatory shit. Cause I was ill health, rheumatic fever and all of that crap. So I had to regain my health. So I think in retrospect, it was probably like 3 years. So, I do believe that Jerry Sigler, who I met years later with this 3-year thing, was probably right. And you got to think about this. Take any musician in the world. They don't get like exponentially greater until the day they die. They don't. They get good. They get like, they hit this point where they're so phenomenal. Then it's the rest of their life or career is trying to maintain that phenomenalness, if that's a word. Okay. We're at a disadvantage as fighters or as athletes. Musicians aren't athletes. That our body is going to deteriorate. Musicians probably slightly, but not that much. Okay. Unless, you have some extenuating health crisis. But I've heard guys play in their 70s and 80s that were just as good as they were when they were in their 30s and 20s or something. But draw from that, people, I always set a 3-year goal. Matter of fact, somebody just emailed me yesterday about this. A wonderful guy, never got to meet him yet, but friendly via email. He lives in Turkey, is interested in training with me. He basically wanted to know how long to get, like, if he wanted to do the Tri-C, how long? I said, look, I can't really answer that because everybody's different. But if you set a 3-year goal, get that in your mind. Now, he hasn't responded. Maybe that was a turnoff, but you've got to be realistic. You don't want an instructor that's dragging you out for 12 years. That's a bullshit artist. Okay. It doesn't take that long, but I use 3 years and then you temper it. Okay. Some people, it may take longer. Some are prodigies. Who knows? But 3 years just to get the techniques. Then you got to develop your character, your repertoire, so to speak, of fighting abilities, just like you would, with music. That's my take on it, at least.
I want to ask you to put a finer point on that.
Sure.
Because one of the things I struggle with, because there's things that I've been putzing around with for years and years. And so I've started to realize for me, and so I guess it's not the years that I've put into some effort, but the hours, if you will. So like in the course of 3 years, if I only put in a few hundred hours, that 3 years is not the same. So I guess my question is to you, and you may not be able to answer this right away. Maybe this is for, calculating in that 3 years to achieve, to make it. And I'm not even sure what the goal is in those, like, if we're trying to say you're, I don't know if you're saying you're peaking in those 3 years or if you're achieving competency in those 3 years. How many hours are you putting in over that time? And maybe it's like, every week you're putting in 10 hours over that course of the 3 years, or, you get where I'm driving at? Like, what's the
and then there's a subset to that. Let's just pull it. All right, let's use your 10 hours a week. Okay, well, during those 10 hours, how much intensity you're putting in? How much focus are you really putting in? Because you could put in 10 hours, yet it could be completely wasted. Okay, it may not be worth a damn. Okay, that's why you can't really pinpoint exactly. But I'm saying 3 years to learn techniques, to be exposed, to have it sink in mentally, and then it's up to you to practice diligently. And again, don't 3 years is a signpost. Okay, use that as, not like a final, like cast in stone. But how much time, how much effort are you putting in? If you're just half-assing it, and a lot of people do that. They talk about going to the gym, and they're not lying. They're at the gym, 8-9 hours a week. They're not making any progress. Well, what I'd have to, what is your training regimen? What are you doing? Okay. So it's more or less a guideline. For example, high school is generally 4 years. Now, let's say you don't flunk, you go through high school here, it's 4 years, you graduate. But somebody's going to be the valedictorian, and somebody's going to be at the bottom. You both went through 4 years, probably had the same teachers. Somebody's at the top of the class, you may be at the bottom of the class. You get me? So that's the same thing. You're there in the classroom the same amount of hours, but the valedictorian's putting in that effort, is focused, is concentrating, is adroit enough to grasp all of this. The bottom feeder isn't. Okay, they probably don't care. They're thinking about cutting class, or the chick across the hall or some shit. Who knows? So there is no cast in stone thing. And every teacher of any ilk, no matter what the topic is, sports, music, education, has great students and has students that weren't so great. That's just the way it comes. Okay, that's just the way it is. But I try to let people know, use 3 years as a barometer. Don't expect this to be over in 6 months. Okay. But even after 3 years, you're continuing to train. This is a lifetime thing. You don't just give up. Okay. You want to just continue on and develop and become creative and do your own thing with it. So to answer your question, Joe, there is no one answer. What we do is so exhausting physically. You can't work out for 8 hours a day unless you're on some real crazy drugs. So at best, let's say 3-4 hours, even at best. So you're at, let's say 20 hours a week tops. Okay. Which is a big number, which is probably not even feasible. 10 hours a week is probably more feasible. Okay. A couple hours a day, 5 days a week or so. It's all about having a structure. That's where the coach comes in. This is what I want you to practice. This is what you need to work on. Everybody's different. I just took to it because it was life or death for me. Life or death for me. And back then, you did what your elders told you. You didn't ask too many questions, right? You just did as you were told. Those days are probably gone, but I did as I was told, and no harm came to me outside of the physical load that it put on me, but no outside extraneous harm ever came to me by doing as I was told.
Do you think you put in about 10 hours a week when you were going?
No, I put in more than that. I mean, for sure. Well, it depends. It depends on what point of it was, what point of the training throughout, those 5 years, things change. But I was I was structured to the point where I didn't play the accordion then. Okay. I didn't pick up the accordion until I was done training. Okay. So I had the drums. So what I knew was when I came home, I had to play the drums first. When I came home from training, I had to play the drums. Get me? Because I can't play the drums at 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to play the drums first. And then I could work on the training. And then on weekends, it didn't matter. Weekends, I could, if I got up early, I couldn't play the drums then. I'd have to train first. And then I could work on the drums. Okay. And training, that was wrestling and boxing. I had to work on all of that. So I got very good with time management. Very good at it. All right. And I found that I was lucky. I had a pretty good scholastic aptitude for a while. That my first period was study hall. So like if I didn't get homework done, I knew that I could get it done either on the bus to school or then in study hall. Sometimes it created anxiety because I didn't get it done. So I had to kind of, deal with that. But a lot of it was time management. Now as an adult, many of us suffer with that time management. You got kids to deal with, or you got your job, or you got a wife or a girlfriend, whatever, that you got to juggle all of this. And time management plays a huge role. And, I used to have a schedule, just like I did in first period was whatever, second period was whatever. I had a schedule for when I got home. I had to do this after I got home from training. I got to do this, do this, do this. And then, unless it was an emergency, my chores, it's shit that I had to do around the house. I try to put, my grandparents understood that I'm doing things. So they let me do that stuff on weekends because I was a good kid. I didn't go anywhere. It wasn't like I was hanging out on a street corner. And then later on, as I got a little bit older and I was really getting really good at this stuff. Like I told you, after about 3 years, that's when I started to get really heavy into the Pac-Man. School, my high school, my junior and senior year, we won't get into it, but basically there was no homework. Okay. And school it was a crazy situation. That I don't even want to get into it. So I was lucky that I had time. I had time to train. I had time to practice working, practice the drums, and I had time to play Pac-Man. Okay. And Pac-Man didn't take long to get good. Okay. It wasn't like I had to practice 5 years to get good at Pac-Man. So time management is a big thing that I can't emphasize enough for people. But I'd probably put in 2 to 3 hours a day, but every day, 7 days a week, unless I was sick, as far as actual training regarding fighting. That's a lot.
I'm going to drop off too, guys. So
All right,
good
Martin.
talking to you, and I'll see you tomorrow, Tony.
See you tomorrow morning.
Thanks for joining. Talk to you later.
Yeah. So, but everybody's different. But I learned how to get the most out of it. Okay. Too. I wasn't wasting time. I think that was an important thing because I didn't have a lot of time. That was a huge thing. When you don't have time, you can't waste it. Right. And I was in a different, listen, it's harder for kids nowadays because there are more distractions. Think about this a minute. There were no cell phones in my day. There was no internet I'm going to watch YouTube videos. I'm going to see how, Tim Cunningham does this move. No, I listened to Rod Von because he was all there was. And in hindsight, he was the greatest of them all. So I got lucky. But there was no internet to take my time away. There was no cable TV. There was none of that. So I got very lucky. I came up at, at the right time. Nowadays, you have all these distractions, cell phones and, shit like that, text messages and whatever. We didn't have that. That we didn't have that growing up. So I could focus on that. And, so yeah, I got lucky in that regard.
Cool. Yeah. No, I think that gives a lot of guidelines and goals like for people to shoot for in their training, because I think that's important, to give you some things to try and aim for every week, and I heard there's a commentator that I like to follow. He's a good guy, but he's also a teacher, and he kind of, maybe this will be my parting thought for the podcast, but he said, he never asks people, hey, what are you going to do with your life? What's your plan for your life? Because he just feels that that's in some ways too big. Sometimes people just kind of shut down when they have to think of their entire life. But he's like, hey, what's the next chapter of your life going to be? What's the next 3 to 5 years going to be? And they do a similar thing in work, like what's your 3 to 5 year plan? And most people kind of just roll their eyes to that. But I think chopping your personal life and having kind of, okay, this is what the next chapter is going to be is a realistic and reasonable way. I think it's achievable, way to kind of break down goals and give you targets to aim for.
It is, because you don't know what's going to throw, you don't know what's going to come at you. And yes, we need goals, but sometimes you have to release that goal, or you set a goal that's not achievable and it works against you. Or you've attained your goal. Now what? Now I mentioned the accordion. So once I was done fighting, I focused more on shooting pool and then the music, the accordion, excuse me, because now I had more time. you just, there's only so much that you can do. I was always the type of person that wanted to be the world's best at what I did. I'm not much of a dabbler. Okay, I don't dabble in shit. All right. If I'm going to do something, I want to be, if not the best in the world, I want to be as good as I can be at it. All right. And otherwise I lose interest. Right. So I felt the accordion, I never was as good as I could have been. The drums, I was as good as I could be for what I did. Now I could have broadened my, I told you I could play Latin music, or, I did play some symphonic shit. I played jazz, I played weddings, polkas. I played what was necessary. And I played very well, if I don't mind saying it. I got a lot of compliments so I did okay for the jobs. I never fell apart on a job. But with the accordion, I could have been better. And it's nobody's fault but me. Okay, because I had the best teachers that there were. I can't bitch about that. I let my teachers down. I let myself down because I got a taste of adulthood. I got a taste of freedom, which I didn't have in growing up. So with that, I became like, a lot of it was girl related, women, going out, meeting chicks, and it's all I cared about, shooting pool, this stuff. And then, come 1993, when I had the aneurysm, that just pulled the pin on the music. So I had a good 11-year run of being a jobbing musician on top of everything else, from basically 1982, when I jobbed on the drums, to 1993, and so on. So that's not an excuse, because the drums were always pretty good, but the accordion, I could have been much better. And I know Ronnie Moon, my accordion teacher from Cleveland, was pretty disgusted. Even when I was studying with Jerry here in Chicago, Jerry never said anything, but Ronnie was pretty disgusted because he thought that I was a natural. He thought I had the potential, and I just didn't push myself. Part of it was this Radvan thing. I went through such horrible like so regimented to the, I don't know. I can't even, it was like boot camp for like 5 years, or so, close to 5 years of boot camp. Imagine having to go through that for the rest of your life. You can't, you burn out. So the music was like that, it was becoming like, the accordion was becoming like, not fun. I just wanted to play tunes. I didn't want to put in all the exercises that I needed, the virtuoso exercises that we talked about. I just kind of bluffed my way through it. So yeah, I put in a lot of hours, but my mind, I wasn't focused on it. I wasted time. So this is important. So I don't like to put an hour on it. It's like, how much effort are you putting in during that time? And I didn't put in the right amount of effort. Nobody's fault but mine, man. I had the time. I had the time to do it. I just didn't put in the effort. So shame on me for that.
It's interesting contrast, though, because you have the experience of performing well in some arenas, and then in your case, like the accordion, you can say, well, this is where it didn't work, and you can contrast, well, where did it not work for the accordion, and maybe why?
Well, part of it too was like the accordion. Well, here, all right, good question. I guess according to my mom, I started pounding on things when I was just an infant, right? And I can remember as a little boy, like we're talking 5, 6 years old, getting spoons out of your kitchen and playing on telephone books. All right. So I was a natural drummer. I don't remember how old I was when I got my first drum set. I know I got a toy drum set, but I worked on side jobs as a kid, bought a cheap ass drum set. So I had like 5, 6 years of playing at home before I was ready. By the time I was 18, I sat in and they're like, wow, you're a good man, you can play. Whereas the accordion, I was already 18 when I started on the accordion. That's old to start on a musical instrument. So I guess what I'm getting at is, now I want to make this perfectly clear here. When I got introduced to playing music at Joey Misculin's place, which was basically a polka. Cleveland is polka capital of of America, polkas and waltzes. I had been playing jazz for 6 years, roughly. When I showed up, I was already like the best drummer they heard. Okay. Because playing polkas was, I mean, no, I mean, I love, don't get me wrong, I'm into that ethnic stuff, but it's not, I had the chops times 10 for that. Okay. So I already had a level of ability that was way, very high. With the accordion, no. Okay. I had to work from the ground up. I was surrounded even by the polka players who could blow me out of the water. By the time I met Ronnie Moon and started studying jazz, I was 21. So I'd have been playing for 3 years. I had gotten some skill studying with Eddie Safani, a little classical shit, but I still was nowhere near good enough. When I heard Ronnie Moon, I'm like, Jesus Christ. This is like almost like seeing Buddy Rich. Well, when I met Jerry Sigler, that was like seeing Buddy Rich. Jerry is the greatest that ever lived, in my opinion. So that's part of the problem, Joe. I went from being a big fish on the drums to and not a big fish in a little pond either. I went from being a pretty damn good drummer to being like a bum with the accordion, like a hack. And I had to work my freaking ass off. And then I leave Cleveland and I moved to Chicago, where like all these giants of accordion, jazz, and classical are. I'm like, what did I just get myself into? I mean, these guys, like, they're demigods. I mean, they're so good. And they liked me because I was a novelty. I was 23 years old and they were all like 60, 70, 80 years old. They're like, they liked me because, oh, here's a kid, fresh meat. He's got potential. He's wow, this is great. We don't see his kids his age, playing block chords or, whatever. So I kind of got that, right? But I wasn't in their level. I wasn't in their, I could do certain things that they didn't do with the chords because of studying with Ronnie Moon and then coming to Chicago and learning that stuff with Jerry. But overall, I wasn't the musician on the accordion that these guys were, not close. So that always was like on me. And then Ronnie used to tell me, he put a lot of weight on my shoulders, man. He's like, you can do it. You could be the next, Dick Contino kind of thing, but on jazz accordion, you can do it. You can do it. And I failed. Plain and simple. I didn't live up to I didn't live up to it. There was no reason that I shouldn't have done it. I could have become a really, like, good guy, good player, like I could have been a virtuoso on it with the jazz because I had the knowledge up here, or I was acquiring the knowledge. I had the teachers, Ronnie and Jerry and a few others, Sammy Capero, whoever, but I failed. I just didn't put in the effort, man. I failed. And nobody to blame but me. So it was a huge letdown. And yeah, what are you going to do? I got to live with that. I mean, I probably don't have that many more years to live, so I don't have to live with it too much longer, right? But I got to live with the fact that I failed. It bothers me.
But I mean, to your point too, life kind of gets in the way. Once you're an adult and you're pursuing relationships and things like that, it does change your ability to focus. I mean, it's not a complete excuse, but it is something else you have to work against. It's another current to swim against, or gravity you have to overcome. Because when you're a kid and you're just locked away and bored with nothing to do, you can be laser focused if to occupy it. But just like you said, with things with YouTube and all these things that are designed to distract us and waste our time, the context.
Yeah, it bothers me, but you're right. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
But
So,
if it isn't women, with me, it was women, going out and having a good time, I don't want to sound like a misogynist or anything, or because I'm not. I mean, I'm sure that I was given an ultimatum somewhere along the way with certain girls, but for the most part, it wasn't that they were telling me don't do it. You know, it just was, man, I had to keep my fighting skills high. I had to keep the drums going, shoot pool. You know, those were the three things that I was good at, like an expert at, those three things. So that was just a matter of plateauing. Maybe the pool, I still had ways to go, but the drums, I got where I was going to be. And the fighting, I was where I was at. I was fine with all that shit. So it's kind of like the pool and the accordions where I wanted to accelerate. The pool I was better at. I just didn't look, man, I just didn't do it. We can come up. I didn't do it. I dropped the ball. I didn't put the effort in. Plain and simple. It's my fault. Nobody stopped me from doing it but me. So I have nobody to blame. I don't. Now, the last 6 years or so, taking care of my mom, 7 years, whatever it's been, that was not her fault. I mean, I didn't get to do anything, right? But all those other years, I could have done it. But anyway, enough of my failures, because we could have 30 podcasts about that. Let's just say, guys, life gets in the way. We all know that. Make a time management thing. Put the effort in. Get the guidance. I'm always here to help anybody I can. Email me. And I want to see everybody do good. I don't care who you're training with. I want to see you become the best that you can be. So thank you for listening. And Joe, it's always a pleasure to see you, man. You know, you got a halo going like you're angelic.
Yeah,
I can
it's a
see it coming
halo
in.
of flies, I think.
Yeah.
But
All right.
no, it was good talking to you. It was a really good conversation. I'm glad the other guys could join in for it too. All right, man. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
See you guys next week.